Hey guys, my name is Patrick and today we're going to talk about the importance of insulation around your steam pipes. Let's begin. So here we have a cross-section of two pipes. One is just regular metal pipe that delivers steam. The other one's the same pipe, but this time with insulation. So we're going to go through and talk about what happens when the steam goes through it. Alright, so the boiler is working. That produces steam, and the next thing that happens is obviously the steam has to flow somewhere to the some kind of openings, air vents and whatnot, and then later to radiators. So you have a cross section of a main pipe, and as this pipe fills with steam, because the pipe is cold, or rather at least room temperature, so let's say 60-70 degrees, then by definition the steam touching the metal surfaces, the surfaces condense, create condensate, and then at the bottom of the pipe you have condensate. So you know what, steam goes one way, and depending on the setup, whether the condensate goes the opposite direction back to the boiler or they flow the same direction, steam goes to the radiators and the condensate returns back to the boiler. But anyway, the bottom line is that the steam touches the metal surfaces. The metal surfaces by definition warm up, yeah. The metal surfaces start giving off heat as well, and then quite a lot of that steam power is getting lost to heat up this metal surface. And then of course you run into other issues. You know, the moment you have condensate in the pipes, then that means that's the amount of space that's being taken up by the water, and that means the less amount of air steam can get into this pipe. So anyway, so the bottom line is the steam enters the pipe, warms up the pipe, and then slowly goes forward, and then warms up a bit more pipe, in the process condensing a bit more, goes farther and warms up a bit more pipe, condensing some, and then going farther and farther. And in that sense, it moves quotation mark slower through the system than a steam moving through either warm pipe or a pipe that's insulated, which in essence means warm pipe. So let's look at this pipe right now. So it's what's called insulated pipe. So this red dots indicate some kind of insulation. So once again, the steam enters this cold metal pipe, and exact same thing happens. So that means the touching the metal surface, because no matter what, let's say if the system was off for a long time, then the temperature of the pipe is going to be the same as the room temperature. Let's call it right now 70 degrees, 60 degrees, let's call it. And then that means the same amount of condensate will occur in the pipe. Yeah. And then, of course, in the process, the pipe will warms up, just like in this example. However, that warmth of the pipe, instead of then being later on consumed by the engulfing space of, let's say, your basement, this warm pipe stays warm for much longer. So what ends up happening then, after let's say 10-15 minutes. All right, so now we're back 10 minutes later. Again, remember the way the boiler works. It works a little bit, sends some steam into the system, and then shuts down because the thermostat doesn't call for more temperature. Then kind of is now the boiler is not working. There's no more steam being sent down the pipes. Then again the temperature drops near the thermostat calls for heat again, the boiler starts working again, and just kind of this cycle on and off cycle goes on well, indefinitely, as long as there's a temperature that requires to be raised inside your house, then the boiler keeps on working. Anyway, so let's say 10 minutes later, there's the temperature in your space dropped a bit, so the boiler is being called to warm up again, and then this is what happens. So our original pipe, so in other words, the steam flowing through it warmed up the pipe, and then here steam flowing through it warmed up the pipe as well. But 10 minutes later, all that warmth from this pipe has dissipated into the surrounding air. However, this one here, all that warmth is staying within the pipe because of the insulation. So now if we send the steam through this de facto cold pipe again, the exact same thing is going to happen that happened before. So in other words, quite a lot of condensate will occur inside the pipe. And so quite a lot of this steam gets wasted by reheating this pipe. In this case, on the other hand, because the pipe is still very much so warm, we send steam through it, and just tiny amount of condensate happens, which means much of the steam will simply travel through this pipe and keeps on going to its destination, which in essence is the radiator. And that's why it's very important to put insulation on all your important pipes. You can not to mention, because you're trying to heat up the same space using those two different pipes, or rather one insulated, one not insulated, and because you keep on wasting energy to re-warm up this pipe, that energy is costing you money. So depending on your system, costs you 15-20% of your heating bill goes directly into warming up the pipe in the basement. So your basement and all the items in your basement stay nice and cozy while your wall gets lighter and lighter. Another aspect of it is because there's a relatively small amount of condensate in this insulated pipe, so because of it you are less likely to encounter water hammer. So as you know, water hammers when there is a condensate in the pipe, and the steam traveling at very fast speed hits this water, then this metal slag gets thrown down the pipe. Because there's very low metal slag, there's very water slag to be thrown down the pipe, then insulated pipes are much less likely to produce water hammer. So once again, insulation is quite inexpensive, and it saves you tons of money. It makes your system way more efficient and less likely to have issues related to water hammer and the likes. So now let me tell you some real world examples. Now that we understand the basic principle of what the insulation does to your pipes, let me show you some real world examples. So I'm going to describe to you how insulation helped solve some other problems on my own system. So once again, do you have a boiler with some water inside? Yeah. And then we warm up this boiler, giving it some heat. And then by definition, it starts producing some steam. And that steam goes to some kind of opening out there. Let's give it some main vent here. And then there are, by definition, you have a main pipe. And next to it, you have a bunch of different radiators attached to this main pipe. So in this specific example, we're going to have all the radiators on the second floor. Okay. With some vent. With some kind of vent. And here as well with some kind of vent. Okay. So as the steam gets to this place right here, it kind of has to, let's call it, decide whether it's easier to keep on going to our main vent, which usually indicates the large opening, or it should keep on going up this here to a much smaller vent. For the sake of discussion, let's say we added a very large vent, so because of that the steam nicely flows through our main vent and then starts going to our small vent in our radiator, then reaches our radiator, heats up the radiator, and this radiator starts producing steam. Then we have this radiator as well. Again, there's lots of steam in the system. The steam goes up. This riser reaches the vent and it keeps on producing steam. And then you have this radiator that seemingly is connected between those two radiators at the exact same second level of the house. And yet this radiator produces lukewarm. It just gets a little bit of warmth to it. Yeah. Despite the fact that it's actually closer to the boiler than this radiator, this one stays lukewarm. And not only that, you can hear that this radiator produces this tremendous gargling sound. You can feel it's almost there's something of a waterfall happening in the pipes that feed the radiator. And the reason for this, in my own case, was that this radiator, the riser pipe, was inside the building. And this riser pipe was also inside the building, as in kind of far away from outside walls. Now this pipe feeding this radiator not only was going through an insulated crawl space, so at some point I ended up insulation to it, so that solved the problem in that little element. but then at some point that this part of the pipe was literally touching the outside wall, so it was uninsulated. So on a cold day, by definition, that pipe was heating up. To use our previous example, so that for a moment that pipe was becoming that pipe. So as the steam was raising through this pipe, the insulated pipe, it had no problem. But the moment it hit this part that was touching the outside wall, from this steam was condensing rapidly, and then all of a sudden all that condensate had to return back to the boiler. Again, this is just a schematic, and because of that, tremendous amount of the steam power was being lost. So this radiator, despite of having the same opening as this the vent as this radiator, and this radiator was heating much less because smaller amount of steam was de facto getting to that radiator. And the reason for this is because that at any given heating coil, the pipe had to warm up first before it let enough of the steam to pass through to get to the radiator. So in that sense, heating or the insulation on pipes is very important, and then you'll be shocked how important it is. And here it's not only related to the heating comfort, but also to the auditory comfort. So in other words, the moment you add insulation to this pipe that condenses tremendous amount of steam, then you don't have this waterfall effect, kind of like the sound effect. So this was a slightly complicated job for me because this part involved me crawling into crawl space and attaching the insulation to the pipes in the crawl space, so it was not particularly comfortable. This involved me ripping out part of the sheetrock and moving the pipe just a little bit away from touching the outside wall, and then wrapping insulation around that, and then of course closing the hole. So again, a little bit of construction was involved in that. Could this be somehow solved? I tried to solve it by adding a larger vent or an additional vent. It increased the venting rate a bit more. So let's say it added a little bit of more heat to this radiator, but the sound always stayed. That was before I added the insulation to this cold part of the pipe. But ultimately, the final answer to it was to adding the insulation to the pipe. That solved the problem. So also, on another note, you want to add the insulation to your pipes, especially the ones that are horizontal pipes, which, as you know, are never perfectly horizontal. They always have to have some kind of pitch, either towards the boiler or away from the boiler. Then solve your pitch problems before you add insulation, so that if you try to solve the problem of the pitch by an insulation, then you might discover that all those pipes, some of them might be sagging, are covered by insulation, and you won't even know whether this pipe, let's say this part of the pipe, is sagging, because the insulation, by being so thick, prevents you from knowing that properly. So that's the importance of insulation on your steam heat pipes. Hope it was helpful.